scale of the devastation following Friday's terror attack in Moscow, which left 137 people dead. Broadcasting from Moscow every hour of the day, this is RT. I'm Ryan Tamari with the top stories today. 2 of the 4 terror suspects in the Crocus City massacre, which claimed the lives of 137 people, have pleaded guilty during a court hearing Sunday evening. All 4 men will remain in custody until the 22nd of May. The suspects have been charged with committing an act of terror, a crime that carries a maximum penalty of life behind bars in Russia. They were arrested Saturday morning after fleeing the scene and attempting to cross into Ukraine. Meanwhile, crowds have gathered outside the tragedy-stricken venue to pay their respects to the victims of the attack. The commemoration began with a famous song by the Soviet singer for whom the concert hall was dedicated. Images of white cranes, a symbol of purity and peace, were projected flying upward on the building's facade and into the sky above. It was an emotional moment for those at the memorial. While some shed tears and comforted one another, the gathering was illuminated by red candlelight, marking the sad occasion. Russia's president also paid his respects to the victims of the tragedy. At a solemn ceremony inside a church, Vladimir Putin lit a candle and prayed for those who lost their lives. Cities across Russia have joined Moscow in mourning as people who have been deeply moved by the tragedy gather to commemorate memory of the victims, including those in Russia's new territories. The procession, called Cranes, is taking place all over Russia. RT's Roman Kosarev visited one such event in the Donetsk Republic and filed this report.
Russian President Vladimir Putin declared March 24th as a day of national mourning for the victims of a terrorist attack in Moscow. All across the country, various events are being held. This particular one is called Cranes, where a crane is a symbol of selfless support for all the victims that died in the terrorist attack. Donetsk is no exception.
In my heart, there is more tragedy and panic. I was watching the news on social media. My whole family was watching and sympathizing with those people who were there. People were shot at point-blank range. I live in Donetsk Republic. I face Ukrainian terrorism. Kiev constantly shells our territory. But what was happening there, what people experienced, it was just impossible for me. The pain resonates in our hearts and in our souls. And all the guys who came today, they share this collective pain. And that's how they make a gesture of remembrance. This gesture of ours also happens in not very safe conditions.
Most of these young people are about 18 to 20 years old. That means that 10 years ago, at the start of the Ukrainian aggression against the people of Donbass, they were barely in elementary school, and they know full well what terrorism feels like.
We know more about terrorism than anyone else. We know what ruthless killing is. We are sure that all those responsible will be punished.
Over the last couple of days, at least 2 civilians were wounded by Ukrainian artillery shelling here in Donetsk Republic. Private infrastructure was destroyed as well. The terrorism that began 10 years ago continues to this day. Despite all that, the people are here mourning for the victims in Moscow. Roman Kosarev, RT, Donetsk Republic.
Authorities have recovered 137 bodies from the site of the attack. 3 of those who lost their lives were children. Now, the scale of the destruction is clear to see here in this aerial footage. The building that's home to the Crocus City Concert Hall has been completely destroyed. We can see where the roof had collapsed, revealing the burnt-out remains inside. RT's Marina Kosareva filed this report as she prepared to board a helicopter to survey the scene.
Under any other circumstances, this would be a very exciting and interesting opportunity, but of course we are going on a helicopter ride at about 100 meters height to take a look at the site of the massacre and see the level of destruction. We are now approaching the site of the terrorist attack. Now, it's strongly being described as a shopping mall. There is a shopping mall next to it. There's also an expo center. This is a very large territory where people come out here to hang out. There are lots of exhibitions, not only concerts. So it's a concert hall, then an expo center, and terrifying. A large supermarket, which is why there were a lot of people Friday night as well. We are now approaching the concert hall, where we can see the roof has completely collapsed down in the concert hall. The fire spread around 13,000 square meters. And it was so hard for firefighters that they couldn't even use specialized equipment in the first 24 hours. They had to work by hand and sort through the metal and the rubble. And from the top you can really see the level of destruction. Now the owners have reportedly said that they will rebuild it and that they will not allow terrorists to destroy the livelihood of the Russian people, and that they will rebuild the concert hall, make sure that people can go back there and enjoy it once again. It's quite foggy today, but we can still see exactly how much destruction those terrorists caused.
This footage shows the aftermath. Emergency services are dismantling the severely damaged structure and clearing the debris. Heavy machinery has been brought to the scene outside. Let's now take a look back at this tragedy and to how this all unfolded just 2 days ago. A warning, graphic images are ahead.
In Crocus City Hall, there's some kind of shooting going on here. People are running, everyone's screaming. They're shooting from a gun, they're shooting at the crowd. Some people are shooting, the hall was set on fire. We were set on fire. Mom, hurry up.
Теракт. Вот люди бегут по мосту.
Russian President Vladimir Putin has said that the terrorists were trying to flee to Ukraine through a crossing that had been prepared in advance for them. He vowed to punish the perpetrators as well as any possible accomplices.
Все четверо непосредственно
All 4 of the direct perpetrators of the terrorist attacks, all those who shot and killed people, were found and detained. They tried to hide and move towards Ukraine where, according to preliminary data, a window was prepared for them from the Ukrainian side to cross the state border. A total of 11 people were detained. The Federal Security Service of Russia and other law enforcement agencies are working to identify and uncover the entire terrorist support base. Those who provided them with transport, planned escape routes from the crime scene, prepared caches of weapons and ammunition. I repeat, the investigative and law enforcement agencies will do everything to establish all the details of the crime. But it is already obvious that we are faced not just with a carefully, cynically planned terrorist attack, but with a prepared and organized mass murder of peaceful, defenseless people. The criminals were cold-blooded and purposefully going to kill, shoot our citizens and our children at point-blank range. Like the Nazis who once carried out massacres in the occupied territories, they plan to arrange a demonstrative execution, a bloody act of intimidation. All the perpetrators, organizers, and customers of this crime will be justly and inevitably punished.
As the 4 terror suspects remain in custody and await their fate, RT's Donald Porter brings us more details.
Russia's investigative committee is still working hard at the scene of the Crocus City Hall terrorist attack to get all the details of what exactly happened there. So far, investigators have recovered 2 assault rifles and over 500 bullet casings that were left behind at the crime scene. And they also say that there were no traces of mines left behind there, in spite of earlier reports that there were. They also found additional weapons and ammunition in Russia's border region of Bryansk, where all 4 suspects were arrested and their vehicles seized. Now, the identification of the victims actually continues as we speak, and as of now, 62 of the 137 bodies recovered from the crime scene have been identified, with 3 children among the total number of bodies that have been recovered. Work is also underway to return the belongings to people that were at the concert on that tragic night that were lucky enough to make it out with their lives. As for those that were not as fortunate, we're looking at current casualty statistics of over 130 people killed and over 180 wounded. But Russian authorities have continued to say that these numbers are likely to rise, unfortunately, as the investigation continues and bodies continue to be recovered.
Meanwhile, new footage from the attacks has surfaced online. People could be seen running for their lives, turning over tables and hiding behind the pillars as the terrorists closed in. In this video, a hail of gunfire can be heard, which continues for more than a minute. The person filming the video was attempting to flee and managed to make his way to the 2nd floor and survive the attack. In the aftermath of the tragedy, shocking recollections of survivors have emerged. We heard from one of the survivors as she spoke to us from her hospital bed.
We were in Crocus City Hall at a concert of the band Picnic. We arrived early, checked our jackets at the wardrobe, and went up to the auditorium to take our seats. Soon after, we heard pops that sounded like gunfire. A very large number of spectators, including us, thought that perhaps these were some kind of special effects before the concert, although it was not clear why they started. After that, we heard more gunfire and smelled gunpowder, and it became obvious that this was a terrorist attack. People said that there's no need to panic, there's no need to rush somewhere, let's go out slowly. But in the end, they finally succumbed to general panic and began to run out of the auditorium. The first exit, there was a crowd there, we couldn't get out, so we returned to approximately our row. My friend pushed me to the floor and we crawled in the other direction. And that's when they started shooting inside the auditorium, somewhere very nearby, and we ran out through the 2nd exit into the corridor. Apparently, we somehow missed those who were shooting because they were coming in. They were shooting around the corner, and we ran further. Somehow we ran forward, then ran back and accidentally saw a bathroom. Then a certain number of people crowded into the room. All of us, remembering the teachings about anti-terrorism, etc., stood in a corner along the wall so that at least from the door we could not be shot all at once. And as far as I know, people in the other bathroom were much less fortunate. They either suffocated or were killed. We were a little bit luckier. My friend and I tried twice to leave and find the stairs or escalator. Unfortunately, we did not remember from memory where it was, and our attempts did not produce any results. We took off some of our clothes, wet them, and tried to breathe through them. After that, we walked along the wall to get back to our bathroom, and we were lucky. We came across a disabled stall where there was a large number of people. There were several sinks turned out from the countertop. Then my girlfriend said that it was the young man who took us out who did it. He explained that there was still some air left in the sewer and it could be breathed. She had a severe asthma attack. The inhaler did not help her, and he directly faced her there. Well, as if he dipped her towards these pipes and said, "Breathe." After that, he said something like, "Let's go, I'll take you out of the bathroom with a lot of people." He went with his girlfriend and I with my friends since there was no visibility. If you shine a flashlight from your phone, you could eliminate maximum distance the length of my outstretched arm. Practically, these flashlights were meaningless at some point. He walked straight and came across an escalator. We walked down the escalator in a single file. He stepped on broken glass on the escalator and there was a sound, a crunch of the glass. Naturally, everyone crouched down, bent down, but moved on because there was no point in staying. There were marks on the glass handrails from where they had been shot. They were broken. We went down the escalator and ahead, well, downstairs on the first floor, we saw an open door. And so we just ran out of this open door.
This all comes as US Vice President Kamala Harris has denied any Ukrainian involvement in the terror attack at the Moscow Concert Hall, instead attributing responsibility to the ISIS-K terrorist group.
Vladimir Putin is already trying to link this to Ukraine and say that Ukraine is responsible. Does the U.S. have any evidence to back that up?
No, there is no whatsoever any evidence. And in fact, what we know to be the case is that ISIS-K is actually, by all accounts, responsible for what happened.
Well, it took the US government only 12 hours to reach its conclusion that ISIS-K was responsible, and in a spectacular fashion, it was able to do so without any substantial evidence or cooperation with Moscow. But back in 2001, it took Washington nearly a month to figure out that bin Laden had committed the attacks on 9/11. Meanwhile, it's been almost 2 years since the Nord Stream pipeline blast, and the US has only one theory there: Russia must have sabotaged its own multi-billion-dollar venture. Now, against the backdrop of the tragic event, journalist and host of InfoWars, Alex Jones, has posted a tweet mocking Washington's defense of Kyiv and blaming ISIS. Earlier, we discussed the matter with him, and he provided evidence to back his claim. Let's take a look.
Before Putin and the Russian government came out, 10 hours or so after the attack, and said, when they say ISIS, we believe that's a cutout for Ukraine. I was saying that because I have the Jerusalem Post right here and all the other mainstream media admitting that ISIS was created by Obama and that ISIS was actually funded by the West in the attacks on Syria. And we have clips of Obama saying he was funding ISIS. So ISIS is just a cutout term they use. Then they go, Western intelligence, from what I believe, hire these people to go in and do this, and then ISIS takes the blame, and then the West can then have plausible deniability. We saw similar cases a few years ago in the Governor Whitmer kidnapping trial, where two groups were set free by the judges saying they'd been set up. They had a third trial that some were found guilty. But the FBI went out over several years and found low IQ people online and paid them huge amounts of money to just talk about kidnapping the governor, and then that was used as this big governor scare. Well, in this case, Western intelligence, other groups, Ukraine, I believe, because that's where they were trying to flee back to, go out and advertise, come here, we'll bring you to Russia, we'll give you weapons, launch this attack, you'll be able to escape, we'll blame ISIS, kind of like they blamed the Nord Stream pipeline on Russia. Why would Russia blow up its own pipeline when it's one of its main funding mechanisms? And that's where all the evidence points to. We've had Zelensky launch all these massive drone attacks inside Russia. We've had cross-border attacks that haven't gotten a lot of attention with paramilitary inside Russia killing people. We've seen journalists, Daria Dugin and others blown up. And so Victoria Nuland said a month ago, we're about to give Russia nasty surprises. And they've now put in charge of most of their military operations an intelligence chief that's an expert on terror. And so Operation Gladio was a NATO plan from the 50s into the 80s that's partially declassified, that if Russia ever starts winning any type of conflict in Europe, whether it's offensive against Russia or the other way around, that stay-behind networks under Operation Gladio would then stage terror attacks and actually blame the Russians for it as a pretext to turn public opinion against them. So before Putin came out and said he believed it was Ukraine and NATO behind this, I had already said that because I've been researching NATO and its policies, and under NATO's military doctrine, when it loses a war, which this is NATO, Russia's fighting, when it loses a war, it then shifts to asymmetrical warfare and terrorism. So I believe all the evidence points towards that. With no evidence, DW.com and then the Germans and others are saying Putin staged this with no evidence. But clearly you see them catching the terrorists, trying to get back to the border into Ukraine. They're interrogated live on the spot and just say, I know nothing, I was given money to do this. That's exactly what Western or globalist intelligence would do, is have useful idiots that have been paid money to carry this out, believing they had a way to escape. But if I really speculated, which I'm speculating now, I would imagine Ukrainian intelligence probably burned them and told the Russians where to grab them so they could set them up and say it was ISIS. So these guys are following the classic pattern of how NATO and how the FBI here in America set people up. And so this is something that secret police have done in major countries throughout world history. And the motive with Putin winning a huge re-election and Russia winning the war and Macron being rejected with his call for 20,000 French troops and really the powers that be being in a lot of trouble, the majority of Americans, 80+% against this war, they can't pass the spending funding to give hundreds of billions or tens of billions more to Ukraine. And so people say, well, why would they do this? It is to try to manipulate Russia into a stronger response to escalate, so NATO has a pretext to expand the war publicly against Russia in Ukraine. And so that's my analysis. I give it about a 95% probability. We don't have all the answers yet, but that is what I believe all the evidence points towards.
You traitor.
African leaders have expressed their condolences to Russia in the aftermath and condemned the attack which targeted innocent civilians. Nigerian journalist Timothy Obieto has more.
The deadly terror act at the Moscow concert venue on Friday has sparked widespread condemnation and reactions from Africa. The